This is, in my opinion, the best question you can ask. Because really think about it. You've just sat through, say, a 1 hour interview. They've asked you questions. They want to understand if you're a good fit. You're basically ending the interview by asking, hey, what did you think about my interview? How did I do? And are there any gaps that I didn't hit on? It's going to give you an opportunity to sell yourself that one last time. What's up, everyone? This is Brandon from Wealth Potion. I recently posted a video all about how to apply for jobs. If you missed it, basically I talked about how I believe most people are applying to jobs wrong because they're taking a shotgun approach, and I recommended a more sniper rifle approach to really target a company and make sure you stand out. And I got a lot of positive feedback on that video, and so today I am doing a sequel to that video, because once you apply for a job and if you followed those steps, you will likely get an interview. The next step is you need to ace the interview. If you don't ace the interview, you're not going to get the job. And so that's what we're talking about today. I'm going to keep it really simple though, because let's be honest, if you're looking for a generic checklist of things to do in an interview, you can ask AI that nowadays. You can go on Google and find plenty of checklists. Instead, I'm going to give you 3 slightly less popular pieces of advice for acing job interviews, and I'm going to speak purely from experience here. Because as I mentioned in my last video, I worked in B2B tech for close to 10 years. I've interviewed dozens, if not hundreds of candidates, not just entry-level positions, but all the way up to directors, VPs, and even C-suite executives at these startups. And from that experience, I can tell you the most common mistakes I see people making. Even C-suite executives make these mistakes. And I think if you nail these 3 things, you are going to be much more likely to nail that interview, move on to the next step, and eventually get the job. So without further ado, let's dive in. The first thing that you need to do is you need to research the company. Again, this is one that you're probably going to see on checklists all over the internet, but I want to elaborate on what that means. In my last video for the job application, I talked about how you should know what the company does, and that's like a basic level of understanding. If you're applying for a job at a company, you should know what the company does. But for the interview setting, you're going to want to do a little bit more research. Ideally, you know who you're going to be interviewing with, whether that's the hiring manager or an HR person, what have you. And you want to personalize your research to the specific interviewer. What this is going to do is it's going to do 3 things. 1, it's going to show that you did your homework, and that shows that you put an effort into preparing for the interview. It shows that you're hardworking, that you're creative, that you're diligent, that you can follow instructions, and that is a win. The second thing it's going to do is going to show that you actually want this job and not just any job. When you put in effort and show that you did research to understand the company and understand who you're speaking to, that is huge. And that is really one of the biggest mistakes I see across all levels of seniority in an interview, is they just come off as if they don't really want the job. And nobody wants to hire someone that doesn't really want to be there. One of the biggest fears when hiring people is that they're just going to leave after 6 months or a year or 2 years. Generally speaking, when people hire someone for a full-time position, they want that person to be engaged and with the company for a long period of time. And the third thing, which you're going to see as a theme throughout this video, is that doing your research is going to make you memorable. That is another huge advantage when you're interviewing, because let me tell you, from the other side of that table, as an interviewer, oftentimes interviewers are interviewing dozens of people. And unfortunately, humans aren't perfect. We don't remember all of the details from interviews. A lot of the interviews might start to blend together, especially if there isn't anything particularly memorable about that candidate. So you want to make sure that you are memorable. You want that interviewer a week or 2 weeks from now to think, oh my gosh, that candidate, they really stood out. They did something unique. And that's what researching is going to do. So here, I'll give you some quick tips on how to research. 1, understand who you're interviewing. If you have an interview and they haven't told you who those people are, you could simply ask via email, hey, just wanted to check in and understand who I'm interviewing. I would love to do some further research on the company so I can really understand who I'm speaking to. That alone, just that email is going to show that you are putting some effort into this interview, and it will help. Let's use an example. Let's say you are interviewing for an entry-level role such as a web designer. You want to understand who you're speaking to. Maybe you're speaking to the director of marketing, right? Or maybe you're speaking to the head of IT because they manage the website. Those are going to be two very different interviews. If you're speaking with someone from marketing, they're likely going to want to know about your creative background, maybe talk about your portfolio of design work. If you're speaking with the head of IT, then the interview may end up going down more technical routes. They're going to be talking about your experience working with websites. That is going to help you ace that interview. And yes, do all the typical stuff, have your stories ready, but you want to really imagine what the interview is going to be like and then do your research around that. Obviously, this is going to differ for every type of interview and every type of role, but that's really what you should be focusing on. What will that interview look like, and how can I best prepare for that specific interview, speaking with those specific people? So that's the first thing you should do. You should do your research, and you should do a bit more research than you did to get the interview in the first place. The second thing that you should do is ask questions during the interview. This is so important, again, at all levels of seniority. I always tell people this when I'm coaching people through interviews, which is that the interview is not a one-way conversation. Yes, the company is interviewing you, but you are also interviewing the company. If you are a high-value candidate, which you should be, and if you aren't, you should at least be portraying that you are, because that's going to be an advantage. You want to show, hey, I'm not just going to work anywhere. I want to understand if this workplace, if this team is the team that I want to join. Most interviews will leave about 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes at the end of the interview to provide an opportunity for the candidate to ask questions. And you do not want to be that candidate that gets to that phase and says, nope, I don't have any questions. That is the worst response for a few reasons, because one, it shows you that you didn't prepare for the interview, and two, it shows that you might not be a high-value candidate, because a high-value candidate would have many job offers, or at least would be expecting to get a lot of job offers, and therefore would be asking a lot of questions to understand if this is the right workplace for me. There's kind of two categories of questions that I recommend asking. The first falls into that first category that I just described, which is imagining that you're a high-value candidate and you really want to assess if this is a good place of work for you. So asking questions like, how do you celebrate wins on this team? When's the last time someone on this team got a promotion? Can you describe what the work culture is like? Or something really simple, speaking to the interviewer personally, what do you love about working at this company? These are questions to get a real understanding of what working at this company is like. So it's going to benefit you in that way, but it's also going to show that you are prepared and that you are doing your research. The second category of questions really falls into that latter bucket. These are questions specifically designed to make you come off as a high-value candidate. One of my favorite questions that I asked in every single interview that I went into was, do you have any reservations or hesitations about me being a good fit for the role? This is, in my opinion, the best question you can ask. Because really think about it. You've just sat through, say, a 1-hour interview. They've asked you questions. They want to understand if you're a good fit. You're basically ending the interview by asking, hey, what did you think about my interview? How did I do? And are there any gaps that I didn't hit on? It's going to give you an opportunity to sell yourself that one last time. And I have been in interviews where this has exactly happened, where the interviewer has said, hey, I think you're a great candidate, Brandon, but I think your limited experience in this industry might be a concern. And that then gave me an opportunity to say, hey, look, I totally understand. And if I were in your shoes, I'd be concerned about that as well. Here's why I think I'd still be a good fit, because I worked in a similar industry, or even though my experience is in a different industry, I think I can bring XYZ to the table. It gives you an opportunity to address the concerns head on right there in that interview. The second question that I recommend asking, again, I would put it right up there, maybe like the second best question to ask, because I think if you only have time to ask one question, you should ask that one. But if you have more time, I would recommend asking this. Imagine you've hired me for the position and it's been 1 year. So it's 1 year from now and you're looking back on an extremely successful year. I've exceeded all expectations in this role. What would I have done and what would have happened in that year? This question is powerful for a number of reasons. One, because it is getting the interviewer to actually imagine you in the role. There's a lot of subtle subliminal power in that where they're actually imagining you in the role, and that's going to make you more likely to get the role. I won't get into the kind of subconscious theory behind that, but more importantly, you're getting a real understanding of what success looks like in this role. That will help you assess if you can achieve those things, and it's also going to give you more information about what the interviewer and the company is looking for as it pertains to success. So maybe, let's go back to that example I used earlier. Maybe you're that web designer and the head of IT says, hey, actually, within the next year, we are hoping to do a full rebrand and website migration to a new website host. And so 1 year from now, hopefully we have not have only completed that, but we will have done that in record time, faster than we originally expected, and we will be seeing greater traffic on the new website. You again then have an opportunity to talk about maybe some of your experience working with a website migration. You now have a real understanding of what this next year at this job will look like. Again, this is just a fictitious example with the web design, but you can start to see how powerful that question is because it's really giving you a sense of what the job will look like, and it's getting the interviewer to start speaking in terms of what success looks like for you in that role. And last but not least, not as important as the other two in terms of increasing your likelihood of getting the role, but I think it's an important question to ask, which is simply, when can I expect to hear about next steps? It's a very basic question, but again, it hints that you are interested in moving the process forward, and it also makes sure that you know what's going to happen next. Maybe they're going to email you, maybe you can expect a call. It's just good best practice to show, hey, I've done this before and I want to know what the next steps might be. All right, so those are the two meaty recommendations. One, research the company and really personalize the interview to who you're speaking to. And secondly, ask a lot of questions, both to show that you've done your research, to show that you're a high value candidate, but also to assess if this company is even a good fit for you. That brings us to the third and final piece, which is easier than the other two, but I think is just as important, which is follow up with the interviewers. And when I say follow up, I don't mean, hey, when is the next interview? I mean simply sending a thank you note to the people that interviewed you. If it was one person or if it was a panel of interviewers, you should reach out to them either via email if you have it, or simply via LinkedIn if they have a LinkedIn profile, and just send them a note later that day or maybe the next morning and say, hey there, I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to interview with me. And if you want to take it a step further, you could personalize your email and say, I particularly really liked that you asked me about XYZ experience, and I'm really excited to hear about next steps. You would be surprised how few candidates, again, even at the VP and C-suite level, don't do simple things like follow up to say thank you. And while you might think, oh, that's such like a minor thing. Why do I have to do that as an interviewee? Again, the reality is it's memorable. I've been on the other side of that table where I have interviewed candidates for a senior level role, and we've interviewed dozens of people for this senior level role, and only 1 or 2 people sent a thank you note. And yeah, it doesn't change the interview itself, but let me tell you, it does make that person more memorable, it makes them more personable, and makes you realize, hey, this is like a kind person that actually appreciates our time, and it does impact their likelihood of getting that role. All right, you can tell I'm very passionate about this subject. Perhaps it's some of that PTSD from sitting through so many bad interviews, because I think that these are pretty self-explanatory things. Yes, they do require effort, but they are not complicated. They are simple. And I think that if you do these 3 things, your likelihood of moving it to the next step and getting that job is going to be exponentially higher than if you do not do those 3 things. So to quickly recap, research the company and the people that you're speaking to. Ask a lot of questions yourself in the interview, and then follow up with a short thank you note. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list. Like I said, there's plenty of checklists out there, but I think those are the 3 most impactful things you can do to maximize your chances of getting that job. If you like this video, if you like this series of videos, as I mentioned, this is a bit of a departure from my other videos, which are more about money and entrepreneurship and the economy. Please do let me know. I'm happy to do more videos about career advice. As mentioned, I've spent 10 years working in tech, and I have a lot of learnings from that time that I'd be happy to share with you all if you all find it valuable. So leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.